What kind of man tells a 16-year-old boy, even the army wouldn't take trash like your father? That's exactly what Officer Carter Hale said the day he stopped Elijah Brooks for the crime of walking home while black. In a quiet suburb of Springfield, Illinois, where everyone's lawn is manicured and suspicion whispers through curtain cracks, Elijah was just another teenager trying to get home from school. He kept his head high, like his father taught him, even when humiliation burned like fire beneath his skin. But what the officer didn't know was that Elijah's father wasn't just some absent name. He was Special Forces, and he was already on his way home. And what happened next? It changed everything. If this story stirs something in you, rage, hope, or both, stick around. Because when dignity meets injustice, you'll want to witness what comes next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The laughter still echoed in Elijah's ears long after he walked away from Officer Hale. Not the friendly kind, not the kind that softens a blow. No, this was the cold, mocking laugh of someone who thought they had all the power. Someone who believed a uniform gave them the right to tear someone down in front of a watching world. But Hale didn't realize that someone was watching closer than he thought. Across the street, behind the thick trunk of an old sycamore tree, a girl stood frozen, her phone recording, her thumb hovering over the stop button. Natalie Reyes had seen a lot of things in her 17 years. But this was different. The way Officer Hale spoke to Elijah, like he wasn't human, like he didn't matter, it lit something inside her. Not just anger, not just disbelief, resolve. She didn't know Elijah well. They had a few classes together. He was quiet, polite, but today he stood his ground with a kind of strength that didn't come from fists or volume. And she knew someone needed to see this. That night, Natalie edited the video. No music, no effects. Just the raw moment. A boy being stripped of his dignity on a sidewalk he walked every day and refusing to fall apart. She hit post. Within minutes, it spread like wildfire. Teen harassed by cop in Springfield suburb. Special Forces? Cop laughs at black teens claim about his father. The comment section exploded. This is why we teach our sons to keep their heads down. He handled it better than most adults. If that's not profiling, I don't know what is. And among the waves of support, there was something else. A whisper, a name that kept appearing. David Brooks. Wait, is that David Brooks's son? I served with a Brooks overseas. Quiet guy, deadly smart. That him? Natalie's phone buzzed nonstop. Classmates she hadn't heard from in months were reaching out. Teachers whispered in the hallways. The tension at Springfield High was thick the next morning. And Elijah? He walked through those doors like nothing had happened. But his classmates looked at him differently now. Some with sympathy, some with awe, and some, like Tyler Morris, the kind who inherited their father's smirks and narrow-minded swagger, looked at him with envy disguised as mockery. "Yo, Brooks," Tyler called out across the cafeteria. "Heard your dad's G.I. Joe. That why he's never around?" Laughter. Elijah didn't flinch. He just kept walking. Calm, silent, dignified. But beneath the surface, the storm was building. And back at home, the air was different too. Tanya Brooks, Elijah's mother, had been calm when he told her what happened. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes just before thunder. She didn't ask for the officer's badge number. She already had it. She didn't call the police department. She called someone else. In a quiet bedroom upstairs, behind a locked drawer in a closet no one ever opened, she pulled out a satellite phone. Only one number programmed into it. She dialed. When the call connected, she said just 2 words. "It's time." She didn't need to say more. Thousands of miles away, in a place where the sun burned red through desert dust, a man stood staring at a monitor filled with data and coordinates. The message was simple. The meaning was clear. David Brooks was coming home. And for those of you watching, the story is far from over. Because what happens when the man they doubted walks onto the scene? What happens when a soldier trained in silence decides it's time to speak? He arrived before sunrise. No grand entrance. No noise. Just the soft hum of rubber tires over a cold Illinois road as the black SUV slid into the driveway of 1729 Timberland Lane. David Brooks was home. To the neighbors, he was just a tall, quiet man in a plain gray jacket, stepping out of a dark vehicle. Nothing about him looked unusual. No uniform, no medals, no trace of war. But Tanya Brooks saw it instantly, in the way he moved, sharp, precise, like every step was calculated. In the stillness of his breath, like he could hear the wind shifting through trees before it even touched the leaves. He stepped through the door without a word, and she was already there waiting. They didn't hug at first. They didn't need to. Their eyes locked, and in that glance was an entire history of late-night calls, silent departures, missed birthdays, and promises made in whispers. "You're early," she said quietly. "I had to be," he replied. "It's him, isn't it?" Tanya nodded. Officer Hale, suspended now but still sniffing around. David's jaw tightened. "And Elijah? He's stronger than we thought, but this shook him. Not that he shows it." David exhaled slowly, pressing his hand over his chest, like grounding himself in the pain of being gone too long. Then he asked the question he hadn't stopped thinking about since the call. Did they make him feel like he didn't belong? Tanya's eyes welled up. Worse, they made him doubt who he is. The words cut deeper than any battlefield wound. David had faced insurgents, warlords, and black ops so secret they didn't even have names. But nothing hit like the idea that his own son was questioning his worth because of a uniformed coward with a badge and a grudge. He walked to the living room. Same photos on the wall. Elijah's 6th grade spelling bee, his first dunk, his awkward Halloween costume phase. But David wasn't in any of them. Not visibly, just the shadow of a presence, a deliberate choice. Not because he was ashamed, because being seen could have meant being targeted. But now? Now it was Elijah being targeted, and that changed everything. Later that morning, Elijah descended the stairs expecting another quiet breakfast. He didn't see the SUV in the driveway, didn't know his father had returned. So when he turned the corner and saw him sitting at the kitchen table, peeling an apple with a pocket knife, calm as a Sunday sunrise, he froze. "Dad!" David looked up and smiled gently. "Hey, son!" For a moment, Elijah couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then he dropped his backpack and crossed the room in 2 strides. The hug was quick, rough, and full of everything they didn't say. "I wasn't supposed to see you for another month," Elijah mumbled. "I heard you ran into a problem," David said, slicing another piece of apple and handing it over. "That's one way to put it." David studied his son's face. How much older he looked, how much quieter his spirit seemed. "Tell me everything," he said, and Elijah did. From the moment Hale slowed his cruiser, to the humiliating pat-down, to the mocking laughter when he mentioned his father. David didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, but something behind his eyes shifted, hardened. Not anger, not yet, something deeper. When Elijah finished, David leaned back in his chair. "You handled yourself well, better than most grown men would have." Elijah shrugged, eyes on the floor. "I didn't do anything. You didn't give him what he wanted. You didn't let him take your peace. That's everything." There was silence again, comfortable this time. Then David added, "You said I was in special forces. I couldn't let him think you just weren't there." David smiled, touched by the simplicity of it. "You told the truth. You just didn't tell the whole story." That evening, while Tanya cooked and Elijah did homework upstairs, David opened the locked trunk in the garage. Inside was a different kind of history. Encrypted comms gear, a small case of tactical documents, and at the very bottom, a rusted tin box he hadn't touched in years. He lifted the lid. There, beneath a layer of carefully folded cloth, was a photo. 4 men standing in the shadows of a nameless desert. No insignia. No markings. Just silence. David's eyes in the photo were the same as they were now. Sharp, unreadable, aware. He studied it for a long moment, then tucked it beneath the cloth again. Officer Hale wanted to play spy. He had no idea what he was stepping into. The next morning, David walked the perimeter of the neighborhood just after dawn. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for signs. He noted the unfamiliar tire tracks in front of their home, the car that had been idling across the street 2 nights in a row. The camera blinked on the corner pole that hadn't been there last week. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. And the pattern said they were being watched. This wasn't just about one bad cop anymore. This was about a system that didn't think twice before crushing a boy like Elijah, and laughing while they did it. But they had made a mistake. They picked the wrong father, the wrong family. And now, David wasn't coming home to hide anymore. He was home to finish the mission. And if you're still with us, this is the part where the story turns. Don't look away now, because when the shadows move, they bring the storm with them. Officer Carter Hale couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt. No, that had long since dried up in him. It was something else now. A chill in his bones he couldn't explain. A feeling he was being watched, challenged, outmaneuvered. Ever since that video of him mocking Elijah went viral, his life had turned sideways. The suspension came swiftly, officially labeled pending investigation. But he knew what it meant. He was the villain now. And the more the town rallied behind the Brooks family, the more Hale's paranoia festered into obsession. They were hiding something. He was sure of it. A teenage kid doesn't stay that calm under pressure unless someone taught him. And no civilian teaches restraint like that. That wasn't a normal father in that house. That was a trained one. Late one evening, Hale sat in his apartment with nothing but caffeine and bitterness fueling him. He scrolled through forum posts, public databases, military gossip chains, anything that might confirm his hunch. David Brooks. Too clean. Too quiet. No social media. No job listed. No military record that wasn't partially restricted. Every click only frustrated him more, until one file caught his attention. It wasn't much. Just a marriage license, a mortgage in Tanya's name, a basic tax form. But then came a line that stopped Hale cold. Military designation, active duty, clearance, restricted. His screen reflected back at him like a mirror of realization. He's still active. Hale's breath hitched. He slammed his laptop shut and leaned back, his pulse pounding. This wasn't some washed-up vet telling war stories. This man was still in the system, still plugged into something most cops, most soldiers, never even glimpse. And Hale? He had mocked his son on a public sidewalk. The next morning, Hale circled the neighborhood again, this time in his personal vehicle. Blacked out windows, no uniform. He wasn't on duty, but in his mind, this was still his beat. His eyes scanned every house like they owed him answers. When he passed the Brooks home, he slowed. No visible security. A mailbox, a neat lawn, a quiet front porch. But it felt like a fortress. He parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, cutting through backyards like he had every right. At the side of the house was a shed, old, unassuming, padlocked. That's where he went. With a thin strip of metal and a practiced hand, Hale popped the lock. It clicked open like a secret giving itself away. Inside, ordinary things. Garden tools, a lawnmower, buckets of fertilizer. But Hale didn't believe in ordinary anymore. He scanned the shelves. And then, on the top row behind a stack of dusty plant pots, he saw it. A weathered metal box. Small, unlabeled, suspicious. He reached up and pulled it down. The padlock on it looked secure, but when he jostled it, the lock gave way. It hadn't been fastened at all. Almost like someone had left it just loose enough to be found. Inside were strange things. Foreign currency. A pocket notebook filled with indecipherable shorthand. A small faded photo of 4 men in military fatigues. Faces shadowed. One of them, unmistakably David Brooks. Not in a traditional U.S. uniform. No identifying patches. Just gear meant for places you don't come back from. Hale stared at the photo. David wasn't smiling. Wasn't even posing. He was watching the camera. Watching whoever was watching him. It sent a cold rush down Hale's spine. He left quickly, locking the shed behind him, but not before photographing every item. By the time he reached his car, his hands were shaking. For the first time since he started this crusade, he felt like the hunted. Back at the Brooks residence, a motion-activated camera blinked to life as Hale stepped into frame. Across town, in a secure room with dim lighting and triple-layer encryption, David watched. "He's in the shed," he said calmly, not to Tanya, but into a satellite phone. "Expected?" the voice on the other end asked. David nodded. "Right on schedule." "Escalation?" "Not yet. We let him think he's ahead." David hung up and walked to the kitchen, where Tanya stood frozen at the sink, having seen the footage too. She turned, her eyes fierce. "He's crossing lines now." David placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let him. The more he moves, the easier he is to track." "But Elijah, I'm watching, every second." The next day, Hale bragged in whispers. To a colleague at the precinct, to a friend with army ties, to anyone who'd listen. "I found something on Brooks," he said. "He's not who he says he is. I'm telling you, this guy's deep ops, and he's lying to everyone." But no one believed him. They'd seen the footage. They saw the town turning. They saw Elijah, composed, respectful, targeted. They saw David, quiet, dignified, distant, but unshakable. Hale's suspicions weren't just dismissed, they were dangerous. And still, the obsession grew. What started as a traffic stop had become a full-blown hunt. One Hale couldn't let go of, even as it unraveled him from the inside. He didn't know it yet, but he had already crossed the point of no return. Because when you break into a warrior's home, when you mock his child in the street, when you challenge the silence that protects a nation, you don't get to walk away quietly. It started with a text. "Need to talk. Emergency. Meet me at Briarwood Trail. Don't tell your parents. Natalie." At first glance, it seemed innocent. Urgent, maybe, but believable. Elijah frowned at the message, his fingers hovering above the screen. Natalie never spoke like that, never used "don't tell" language, and she definitely wouldn't ask him to meet her alone in the woods. His instincts screamed. He didn't reply. Instead, he stood up from the kitchen table and walked into the living room, where his father was finishing a quiet phone call. "Dad," Elijah said, holding out the phone. "Look at this." David took it without a word, read the message, read it again. Then he looked up, and his eyes changed. "That's not Natalie," he said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because I train people to write bait like that, and I train better people to spot it." He handed the phone back. "Pack your bag. Don't go near the windows. I need to activate the house." Within minutes, the house turned into something different. It didn't look like a fortress from the outside, but now it behaved like one. Steel lock bolts clicked into place. Glass panes, once ordinary, shimmered with a dull sheen, laminated against breach. David moved through the house with purpose, keying in codes, checking sensors, loading protocols like he was back in the field. "This is real, isn't it?" Elijah asked, following him. "He's coming." David didn't answer. He didn't have to. The first sign came as a subtle pop, the sound of gas canisters breaking through a side window. "Down!" David shouted, grabbing Elijah by the shoulder and pulling him to the floor. The air hissed. Thick white smoke began to crawl through the vents like a ghost. "Gas grenades," David confirmed. "Not police issue. Military grade." Angela rushed from the hallway, coughing into her elbow. "How the hell did he—" "No time," David cut in. "Back door. Go." They moved quickly, David guiding them like a shepherd in a storm, his eyes scanning, his mind calculating. But just as they reached the kitchen, the side door crashed open. A masked man in tactical black gear burst through, gun drawn, arm locked around Elijah's throat. It was Officer Carter Hale. "Don't move," Hale barked, his voice thick through the mask but unmistakable. Angela screamed. David froze. Hale shoved the barrel of the gun harder against Elijah's temple. "I said, don't move!" David's hands went up, slow and visible. "You don't want to do this, Carter." "Oh, I think I do," Hale snarled. "I warned you. You people think you're untouchable, hiding behind badges and secrets and cameras. But now, you're in my world." "You crossed a line," David said, voice calm but cutting. "And there's no walking it back." "Oh, I'm not walking away," Hale grinned behind his mask. "I'm taking your son with me. Just us. No distractions, no fake IDs, no backup." Elijah struggled, but Hale's grip tightened. Move again and he dies. You think your dad's gonna save you from that? David's body shifted, just slightly. Let him go. Take me instead. Hale's laugh was sharp and ugly. You're too dangerous. The boy's leverage. And when I'm done, we'll see what daddy really is. With that, Hale dragged Elijah backward out the door, into the smoke, toward a waiting car. Angela sobbed, frozen in place. David didn't chase. Not yet. Instead, he reached down and tapped a device strapped to his wrist. Blackbird compromise, he spoke into it. Priority Alpha. Tracking active. Angela grabbed his arm. Tell me we can find him. David's jaw set. He's wearing the bracelet. It's exfil grade. Satellite ping, 4-second delay max. Angela nodded, but her voice cracked. He has our baby. David looked her dead in the eyes. And I'm bringing him back. 20 minutes later, an old warehouse on the edge of town lit up with motion. Inside, Elijah sat in a rusted metal chair, zip ties cutting into his wrists, eyes wide but focused. Smoke still lingered in the air, swirling under flickering fluorescent lights. Hale paced in front of him, gun still in hand, rambling now. You're not scared? He snapped. You should be, because your dad's not coming. You hear me? He's not some hero. He's a ghost, a fraud, a myth. And when I pull back the curtain, there's nothing there. Elijah didn't answer. His eyes scanned the room. 2 exits, 1 camera on a tripod, 1 window too high to reach, 1 man falling apart in front of him. You think this proves something? Elijah asked finally. What? This, kidnapping me, pointing a gun. It doesn't make you strong. It makes you small. Hale's nostrils flared. You don't know anything. I know you're scared of my father, and that's why you keep talking about him. Hale lunged forward, slamming his fist on the table beside Elijah. Shut up! But before another word could be said, the air shifted. Something moved in the shadows. From the back of the warehouse, a figure stepped into view. Calm, controlled, unarmed. David Brooks. Hale spun, gun raised. How did you? David kept walking. You're insane, I'll shoot him. No, you won't. Back off. David stopped, hands at his sides. You won't shoot, because despite everything, you still want to be the good guy in your story. Don't test me. I'm not. And then, David moved. So fast, Hale didn't have time to think. With 3 strides, David closed the distance, disarmed him in one fluid motion, twisted his wrist back until the gun dropped with a metallic clang. Hale swung wildly, but David didn't swing back. He redirected, deflected, disarmed again. Every motion measured, not to destroy, but to control. It wasn't a fight, it was a message. This is what power looks like when it doesn't need to shout. Seconds later, Hale was on the ground, gasping, wrists pinned by cable ties of his own. David turned to Elijah and sliced the zip ties in one swift motion. You okay? Elijah nodded, rubbing his wrists. Told you he'd crack. David gave a faint smile. You did? Outside, sirens approached, the ones David had quietly summoned before stepping into the lion's den. Inside the warehouse, a father stood over the man who dared touch his son. No violence, no vengeance. Just the quiet storm of justice done right. And now the world would know. Because as the media scrambled for answers and as Hale screamed conspiracy into the wind, the story had already changed. The boy who walked with dignity was no longer alone. The ghost who walked in silence had stepped into the light. And for everyone watching, the real fight was only beginning. The sun rose differently over Springfield that week. It didn't rise over just another quiet suburban town anymore. It rose over a reckoning. News of Elijah's kidnapping and rescue spread like wildfire. The footage, David Brooks walking his son out of the warehouse while federal agents secured Officer Hale, hit the evening news before dinner. The town watched in silence. They saw the man they once whispered about, Elijah's quiet, distant father, calmly hand over evidence. No speeches, no anger, just presence. They saw the boy who never made trouble get paraded in cuffs, then rescued with dignity. And they saw Hale, the officer some had trusted, taken away screaming about secrets and ghost operatives. Something broke that day in Springfield, and something else opened. At school, Elijah walked the halls a little differently. He didn't strut. He didn't shrink. He moved with purpose. Head high, eyes steady, just like his father. Students whispered less. Teachers smiled more. And Tyler Morris? He didn't say much of anything anymore. Elijah wasn't a myth anymore. He was a mirror for every kid who had ever felt small, misunderstood, or unwelcome. And quietly, without fanfare, they started sitting beside him at lunch, asking him about things other than basketball, listening. That Friday, the school held a forum on courage and community. Elijah didn't want to speak at first. He wasn't a performer. He didn't need the spotlight. But when the principal asked him to say something, not about what happened, but about how he handled it, he stood. He took a breath, eyes scanning a room that had once looked through him. And then he said, "My dad once told me that real strength isn't loud. It's knowing who you are when no one else believes you. That's how I got through what happened. And if you ever feel like you don't belong here, remember, you do. And I see you." The room was quiet. Then the applause came. Not just polite, but real. It wasn't for surviving what he'd endured. It was for how he endured it. Meanwhile, across town, David Brooks did something that surprised everyone who thought they knew him. He opened the doors of a small training center on Maple Avenue. Not a gym, not a dojo. A place called Clarity and Courage Academy. No uniforms, no ranks, no talk of missions, just self-defense, discipline, and mentorship for kids like Elijah, for kids who needed to be seen. On the first day, 10 students showed up. By the end of the month, there was a waiting list. Some of the parents who once crossed the street when David walked by now stood in line to enroll their own children. And upstairs, taped to the wall of the training room, hung a simple photo. Elijah standing beside his dad. No badges, no medals. Just two men who had weathered the storm and stood tall afterward. Springfield had changed, not overnight, not all at once, but enough. Enough for people to question what they once accepted. Enough for quiet conversations at dinner tables about race, fear, and silence. Enough for kids to walk home without glances that sliced like knives. This story isn't about a hero. It's about a father, a son, and a town that finally saw what had always been right in front of them. 2 months after the storm, the town of Springfield was quieter, but different. The silence wasn't the kind that hides behind closed doors anymore. It was the kind that settles in after a lesson's been learned. On Maple Avenue, the Clarity and Courage Academy was buzzing by 4 p.m. every day. Kids of all backgrounds came through those doors, some shy, some angry, some lost. But all of them came seeking something more than just self-defense. They came for understanding. They came for a man who didn't speak much, but when he did, it landed. David Brooks taught them how to stand tall without raising their fists, how to move quietly but powerfully, how to be seen without having to shout. Upstairs in his modest office, a worn photograph rested in a frame on the windowsill. It showed a young David, barely 20, standing with 3 other men in a faraway place. The colors faded, but their eyes still burned bright. Next to it was a new photo. Elijah, wearing the same quiet expression as his father once had, speaking at the school assembly. 2 generations, same posture, same fight, different battlefield. Elijah had changed, not in ways that most people could see, but in ways that mattered most. He now walked into rooms without checking who was looking. He raised his hand in class more, and he listened, really listened, when younger kids came to him for advice. "I don't know what to tell them," he admitted to his father one night. "They ask me how I stayed calm, what I'd do if it happened again." David didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed Elijah something, an old folded piece of laminated card. It was worn along the edges. Elijah opened it slowly. It was his father's military code of conduct. From years ago. Rules to live by. "Read the 3rd line," David said. "Be strong when silence is the only defense." "That's what you showed them, son," David said, his voice soft. "You didn't just survive what happened. You modeled what dignity looks like under pressure. And now they're watching, not to see if you're perfect, but to see if you're real." Elijah blinked hard. "So what do I tell them?" David smiled. "You tell them the truth. You tell them what you needed to hear." That truth came weeks later, during Springfield's annual community town hall. This year, the mayor had added a new moment to the ceremony. Stories of courage, youth voices. Elijah didn't expect to be nominated. He almost turned it down. But when his name was called and the spotlight found him, he stepped up. He looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some wary, some grateful. And he began. A few months ago, someone tried to make me feel like I didn't belong here. He had a badge, a weapon, and the benefit of the doubt. But I had something else. I had a family that stood tall, even when it was safer to stay quiet. I had a father who taught me that strength isn't about fists or force. It's about knowing who you are, even when the world calls you a lie. And I had a community, some of you right here, who decided not to look away. The room was still. So no, this story isn't about me. It's about what happens when the truth comes out and the people listening decide to change. Not with guilt, but with action. He closed with the words his father had said to him on that long, quiet night after the warehouse. Control the things you can, and your reaction, that's always yours. The crowd stood, not because they were told to, but because they understood what had just happened. A boy had become a man in front of them. That night, the Brooks family sat together at the dinner table. No locks engaged, no gear check, just family. David reached across and squeezed his son's shoulder. Angela smiled, pride written across every feature. And outside, the streets of Springfield carried a different energy. No suspicious glances, no whispers, just neighbors, waving, smiling, seeing each other, really seeing, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't loud. They start with a whisper, survive a storm, and echo through the people brave enough to carry them forward. In a world that often rewards noise, it's easy to forget that the most powerful acts are sometimes the quietest. This story reminds us that true strength isn't always about shouting the loudest or fighting the hardest. It's about standing your ground with dignity when your voice is dismissed, your worth questioned, or your family challenged. For older generations who have walked through decades of change, this message is especially clear. Your legacy isn't just what you say, it's how you live. It's what your children see when you face adversity. It's how you respond when others wrong you. And it's the grace with which you rise after being pushed down. David Brooks showed us that we don't always need to react with rage. Sometimes the most enduring power is the kind that moves with purpose, speaks with calm, and acts only when necessary. He protected his family not through aggression, but through presence, principle, and preparation. As elders, we are keepers of stories, protectors of values, and in moments when we are tested, or when our children are tested, it's our wisdom, patience, and steady guidance that carry the next generation forward. So let this story be your reminder. You're never too old to lead by example. Speak truth, stand firm, and pass on the kind of strength that doesn't fade. If this message touched you, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it today.